Well, hey, all you wiretappers out there, back here in the studio of Gangland Wire. This is kind of a shorty. Want to take care of you guys in the, especially the audio. I started working on a book written uh, by some New York City policemen, or they like collaborated with another author, and they told a lot of stories about being a New York City policeman. And in particular, they got a bunch of guys from the intelligence unit to tell stories. And so I was going through them, and there were great stories about trying to bug the Ravenite social club, which was Gotti's social club and Dellacroce's social club also. Before that, it's this social club, the Ravenite on 477, I think, Mulberry Street, in Mulberry Street, down there in Little Italy in Manhattan. It goes all the way back to Albert Anastasia, and then Carlo Gambino took it over. And then Carlo Gambino, if you know anything about him at all, he likes to keep a low profile. And by the time he took it over and been there for a while, there was so much heat on it and so much police and agents, FBI agents' attention that he left there, and he gave it to Neil Dellacroce. So he took it over, and then Gotti will eventually take it over. So it's got a long and storied history. It's a shoe store now, by the way. I'll put some pictures up here on the YouTube channel. But the NYPD were working on it big time because, like Gambino noted, there's a lot of attention paid to it, and they got what the FBI always called a plant or an observation point. And that would be an upper floor apartment with a window and where you could see the front of the social club. Well, we did it down here in Kansas City. Boy, and we were in what we call Little Italy or Columbus Park down here for our social club, and it was really hard to get. Matter of fact, the FBI talked about buying a whole house, but that house was not for sale, and it was right across the street, but there was nothing else really to speak of. We had a spot that was up high at a community center that was almost a block away. Now with binoculars, you could pick out tags, and then after a while you knew guys' cars, so you didn't have to actually see the tag to note that so-and-so came. But you couldn't really exactly see the front. You could only see the cars as they pulled along Troost and then took a left and parked somewhere around the club, or if they went east and west on Fifth Street, and if they came from the east and parked on the east side, you couldn't see them from that particular plant we had. It was kind of a temporary deal anyhow. I once spent Super Bowl Sunday up there watching to see who was coming and going, and if we'd see one of the named targets on the FBI wiretap affidavit, call them down at the wire room and say so-and-so's there, and then they could turn on the bug that was inside. They didn't really pick up anything, didn't really work very well. And getting a bug in one of those places is, it's just not as easy as it sounds. And you're going to hear a lot of stories here about guys trying to get something going in the Ravenite and failing again and again. I think it's important. We talk a lot about how mob guys work. I'm a copper. I like to talk about how the cops work too. We just keep throwing shit up against the wall to see what sticks. And, sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. I remember we threw a pen register on a drug dealer. It was a connected guy, Michael Caldarello. He had a biker bar, and he was connected with some bikers, one of the biker gangs, the El Forasteros, I believe. And we put a pen register on there, and we got a lot of kind of calls to people who were supposedly drug dealers, and then but it wasn't really going anywhere. But we were, slowly but surely building a probable cause. And then he died. He died of an overdose one night, and we quickly got a search warrant for his house because the girlfriend who was there when he died said, he was shooting cocaine. And then he had some kind of a heart thing, and he died. And we found a kilo inside of his house and a lot of other things. We seized a bunch of stuff from him, but it's just really hard to do this stuff. But a lot of the stories are in the trying. May not be successful, but the stories are in the trying. So I apologize up front that the audio is a little bit different. A couple of them I did by phone, just for shorts on YouTube, and then I looked at these other stories and I thought, well, I'm going to continue doing shorts. I'll just do them here on the computer with a better microphone. I'll just cut them up and then put them there. But I wanted to give you guys on the audio podcast because you're my guys. Oops, my phone's ringing over there. I got to check that out. Anyhow, guys, enjoy. Well, hey, guys, I found this book, Cop Talk. It's got some really interesting stories in it from NYPD. And one of them was they were on a surveillance at the Ravenite, and they saw a wooden bench sitting out in front that Dellacroce would sit at and talk to people. So they stole it late one night and replaced one of the boards that had a bug inside of it. But a neighborhood lady saw him stealing it. So she told somebody at the Ravenite about it, and they started taking the bench apart, and they found this hollowed out board with a bug inside. That was a $1,000 bug, by the way. So they set it aside, just set it up against the wall and called Gotti because they didn't know what to do with it. And finally time Gotti and Dellacroce got there, there'd been some time elapsed and the cops saw this was going on. So they sent one of their guys walking down the street and he just picked up the board and kept on going. Gotti gets there and he says, "You stupid bastards, you had it and you let them steal it back from you." Another little story out of this Cop Talk book. This was great. They're trying to get a listening device in the Ravenite Social Club. They're on Mulberry Street. So they try it one night and they spend the whole night trying to pick the lock. They can't get in. They try it again. They take a whole big crew. They have 2 guys in a Con Ed truck out in front. They have 2 detectives in a radio car cruising around. They have a couple more look like bums walking around the neighborhood. They have a couple of guys acting like they're drunk and they're trying to pick the lock. Well, there's a dog on the inside, so while they're trying to pick the lock, every time they get the pins on the tumblers up a little bit, the dog will jump up against the door and it'll knock them back down. Finally, a neighborhood lady hears this racket, calls the club manager who comes running out, and then he runs up to the Con Ed truck because he sees these guys out by the front door, and he says, "Hey, officers," he said, "arrest those 2 men, they're burglars." And of course, they run on off then, so it was a hard place. After a couple of times of breaking into the Ravenite Club or putting the microphone in the bench out front, the NYPD cops tried another outside bug. They had noticed that Gotti and Dellacroce would often walk outside past the Ross Trucking Company and into a chicken market. The NYPD electronic genius, Phil Ross, made 6 small, sensitive microphones. Then they strung from the top of the Ross Trucking Company, they strung some wire and hung those microphones down over the path where Gotti and other people, and Dellacroce in particular, might walk. All they heard was the sounds of chickens and, other ambient sound while they could sit up on that roof and actually hear. They claimed they actually heard Gotti telling Dellacroce that I want to kill Paul Castellano. So, who knows? They finally abandoned that effort. After the failure of breaking into the Ravenite and the microphone on the bench and the mic suspended up in the air over a walk and talk place, the NYPD tried going into the basement under the Ravenite. They used what's known as a spike mic. This is a microphone attached to a thin spike that they then drill up through the floorboards up into between the joist and the basement. And so just the very little point of the microphone sticks out. Well, that picks up vibrations in room. And then there's an actual kind of a receiver on the end of that spike mic. And then that's hardwired and it goes, they hide the wire up along the floor joist and the rafters in the basement ceiling until they can get it outside. And then they ran it to another building. So what they did, they ran it to a firehouse nearby. Well, there was a fireman in that firehouse that was a gambler. You can't trust those firemen. And, you can't trust cops either. And he saw what was happening. So he goes over to the club. He's a gambler. He goes over to the club where he catches this Mickey Cirelli, who's a bookie and the club manager somewhere, and says, "Hey, these cops are running some wire from over by your guy's club." And it wasn't really working anyhow. Those things are dicey at best. And they couldn't hear anything. Then all of a sudden they started hearing voices talking about, "Well, what's this?" And somebody like touching the spike mic and pulling out, "Well, where do these wires go?" They quickly cut their wires and snuck away with their recording equipment, which was in their plan or their observation point. The NYPD maintained an apartment as an observation point close to the Ravenite. One night they were sitting in the dark, and they heard voices under their window. And then they heard a ladder being placed up against the wall that led up to the window. So they kind of sneaked a peek, and they saw somebody coming up toward their observation window. Now, this is the same window that they used to film these Gambino guys congratulating Bruno Whack Whack and Dellacroce, who was in the Bonanno family. And this was like an hour or so after Carmine Galante was killed. Like, it was, that the word really didn't have time to get around unless you were in the know, and they're clapping him on the back and kissing him and everything. That film will later be used in the commission trial when they convict Whack Whack of that murder, taking part in that murder. But they hear down below, off this ladder, Buddy Dellacroce yelling up to somebody, said, take the screen off, look in. And they hear this guy say, well, there's nobody in here. Buddy yells back up, I got some gasoline, just burn the place. And so the cops are like readying their guns. They're like pulling their guns out of their holsters, getting ready. The guy says, we can't do that. We'll burn down the whole building, and there are people in there. They go, Buddy and this guy go back and forth about whether he's going to burn this building or not. And the cops are like, ready to start. One of them says, hey, we're just going to have to shoot him off that ladder if he comes up here with some fire. Buddy keeps yelling, I don't care. The FBI's in there. Burn it. And the guy never would do it. And they walked back down the ladder, and the cops reholstered their guns. And they continue to use that observation point for a while. You've seen a lot of video and things like that out. It was a pretty good spot. That was hard to get, guys. So I hope you like my little contribution to how the cops work on the mob, how intelligence units work on the mob. I can verify every one of those stories about trying to pick locks or trying to get in, setting up a whole big operation where you got a couple of guys in uniform cruising the area, and you got a couple of guys in a powered light truck. We're here in Kansas City. I remember one night we were trying to put a camera in up over a guy's computer. This was later on in my career, and they had computers by then. And we had a couple of guys with a powered light truck just blocking off the streets all the way around. And we even had a canine cop come up and just came up to the barricades. And one of my guys that wasn't very well known on the police department, he'd been a technical guy and always kind of been in the background. And when he's in patrol, he was probably, somewhere on dog watch. I don't know. And so the canine copper comes up and starts asking what's going on. Old Power's out over here. And he carries this whole conversation, and the canine officer just goes ahead and leaves. So he didn't know what was going on. So I hope you like these stories. I loved them. This was a great book. It was a fun book. It's got a lot more stories in it. You see the images of what the book looks like if you're on YouTube. The title of the book is Cop Talk: True Detective Stories from the NYPD by E.W. Count, C-O-U-N-T. So I appreciate y'all listening in. And don't forget, if you've got a problem with PTSD and you've been in the service, go to the VA website and get that hotline. If you got a problem with drugs or alcohol, go visit our friend Anthony Ruggiano. He's got a hotline number. If you're going to want to go down to Florida and go to treatment, get a hold of him on that hotline, and he could be your counselor. So that would be great, wouldn't it? If you do that, give me a story. Come back and tell me about it in some manner. I just want to know. Anyhow, don't forget, I forgot to say this before, I like to ride motorcycles. So watch out for motorcycles when you're out there. Thanks a lot, guys.